Is 3 hairs a lot or a little? I'd say depends. 3 hairs on my head, too little. 3 hairs in my soup, too much. Perspective is a powerful thing. As you know, this TEDx conference is centered around the idea of a paradigm shift. Now, to me, when you really boil it down, a paradigm shift on any scale, whether it's a global scale, between 2 people, or just within yourself, is really impossible without a fundamental shift in perspective. Now, as a professional mentalist, magician, and perception strategist, I've truly grown to appreciate the power of perception and the value of perspective. Now, however, this is not going to be a magic show. Instead, in the next several minutes, I want to tell you why I think shifting perspectives is one of the most undervalued skills in the world. I'm going to break down what makes it so elusive and hopefully inspire you to refine and master this skill. Now, you all know that I'm not Harry Potter. I never went to Hogwarts. I have no special powers, all right? But I do understand the power of perception and the impact it has on reality. So when I perform a magic trick, the only thing that I'm actually focused on is just creating a momentary experience inside somebody's mind. You see, as magicians, our task is to take something impossible and to figure out which perspective, which words, what timing, what state is going to create that experience, make something impossible become possible, even if it's just inside somebody's mind. Because after all, it can be argued that all experience is just really in our minds. So here's what happens when you see a magic trick. You see, there's an information gap. You simply don't know how the magician went from point A to point B. But our minds don't like to not know, right? It creates cognitive stress. So we make a snap assumption. Right? Like we take a guess. We sort of build a bridge. Now, this bridge is not based on actual facts because when you're watching a magic trick, you don't have the facts. So what is it based on? It's based on previous experience, available information, tendencies, patterns, preferences, and cognitive biases. Now, psychologists and behavioral science experts have identified hundreds of different cognitive biases. You might recognize some of these, like, for example, confirmation bias, loss aversion bias, status quo bias, and blind spot bias, my favorite one. It's a tendency we all have to recognize the impact of bias in other people's decision making, and yet we fail to recognize that same impact in our own decision making. These self-deceptions are extremely powerful and have a big role in how we perceive the world, how we interpret the world, and how we make decisions. And they all work in tandem, creating a compounding effect. So if you think about it, it's like a tropical tree that's designed to stay in the ground. So are our perceptions. You see, it would require like a massive hurricane to unroot these trees, just like it would require a massive amount of energy to change somebody's perspective about reality, their beliefs, or even the most ridiculous and unproductive misconceptions they might have. And we all have them. You and I are no different. You see, what I've realized about people is that the most creative magicians in the world, the most persuasive negotiators, the most effective leaders, teachers, and parents all share a common attribute. And that is the ability to shift perspectives. They've mastered it. They do it intentionally, and they do it more often than anybody else. But here's the thing. This is a lot more elusive of a skill than you can imagine. The reason I think that this is a very undervalued skill, the world's most undervalued skill, is because shifting perspectives can fundamentally transform reality, and yet we take it for granted. We devalue it because we think we're already doing it. Let's be honest. Everyone sitting here today, how often have you actually managed to catch yourself in a heated interaction, right? And go, okay, brain, focus, let's put away our bias, let's put away our emotions, perspectives, and truly internalize this other viewpoint, right? Like we all like to think that we're good at jumping into somebody else's shoes, but that's just not the case. That's not true. To actually put your own understanding aside and consider another viewpoint is actually, well, it's counterintuitive. In some cases, it's actually impossible or nearly impossible. It requires a lot of conscious, mental, and emotional energy. I'm looking at your faces, some of you don't believe me. You think it's a hyperbole, I'm exaggerating. Let me prove it to you. In a moment, I'm going to show you a picture. It's going to be a picture of a young woman looking over her shoulder like this. So I want everyone here to please take a look at the screen, take a look at the woman, and then give me a thumbs up if you can see the old grandmother instead. Okay, awesome. So there's a few thumbs up going up. There's the one guy giving you a different finger, but that's fine. I'll accept that too. I'll accept that too. Now, for those who are confused, let me show it to you. Here's the outline of the young woman. You can see the hair, the ear, the eyes, and then here's the old woman. Is right. You see that sound? That is a shift in perspective. Let me show you something. I'm going to show you another video right now. I want everyone to really put their conscious energy into this. Really focus and try to make this happen, okay? I'm going to show you a video of a train going into a tunnel. And what I want you to do is just use your mind to make this train go the other way. Give me a thumbs up once you've done it. Now try this. Try making it flip back and forth and see how fast you can actually manage to do this. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that fascinating, right? Like you can actually feel the energy that's required in your body, in your mind, to make that snap shift in your mind, right? To flip that perspective. And this is just some simple images. In fact, that is not even a video. It's just 2 frames of the train going left and right. And so technically it's going in both directions. And so whatever you choose to perceive, that's what you're going to get. Imagine how much more energy it would require to change the way you think about something a lot more complicated, especially if there's emotions involved. The further an idea is from your point of view, the more energy is required, right? It's easy to be empathetic to somebody who looks like you, speaks like you, and thinks like you. It gets a lot more difficult when somebody looks different, thinks different, has a different understanding of the world. But let me tell you, it's worth putting in the effort. Because when you put in the effort to shift perspectives and consider other viewpoints, the results are amazing. This results in far more effective communication, more innovative and collaborative teams, stronger communities, and a healthier mindset. Now, you see, what I love even more than magic and mentalism is what happens behind the curtains. You see, the actual methods behind the tricks that I perform on stage are actually more beautiful and mind-blowing to me. Because you can learn a lot from the perspective of a magician. Let me give you an example. The image I showed you earlier of the young woman and the old woman. The fact is, there is no person in that image at all. It's merely noise represented by pixels projected by a beam of light into the screen. It's our proclivity as human beings to seek patterns that leads us to perceive a person in that image. And then as soon as we make that snap assumption, we immediately start searching for additional information and evidence to build and confirm that perspective, making it more and more difficult to consider a different viewpoint. So how can we actually refine the skill? How can we get better at shifting perspectives? Well, ironically, these same illusions actually teach us 3 important lessons. And if you consider those 3 things in every single social interaction, you're going to be much more competent at shifting perspectives. The first, just because you're right doesn't mean the other person is wrong. You have to have the humility to understand that every single person that's ever walked the earth has a unique experience and unique perception, right? Imagine how much knowledge, how much information is out there as long as we're willing to consider it. The second thing is don't assume. Make the effort to find out. See, what I've learned as a magician is that assumptions is what gets us in trouble. Okay? Assumptions is what allows magicians to create a trick, what makes marketers get you to click. But here's the thing, you can't actually stop yourself from assuming. So I'll be honest, you can't really stop making assumptions, right? But just because you can't control making assumptions doesn't mean you should let your assumptions control you. Just remember that when we make quick judgments, it's often predictably irrational. So instead of assuming, ask with the intention to understand, shift perspectives, and find out. And third, the third thing these illusions have demonstrated is that shifting perspectives actually becomes easier the more you do it. When you first looked at that train, right, it took a little bit of effort to make it go the other way, right? But then all of a sudden, it became just a few seconds later where you were switching it back and forth with ease. And so what this reminds us is that shifting perspectives is definitely a skill. And like any skill, it can be refined and mastered. And the good news is the opportunities are everywhere. Literally in every single human conversation and interaction. And even when you're just thinking to yourself. Let me tell you a little example from my life. After spending about 10 years working in marketing, heading up marketing in an AI software company, graduating from university in business management, and performing mentalism across the country, I thought I developed some really interesting and unique, tangible techniques for persuasion, influence, communication. So I approached some conference planners to see what they thought about me creating a keynote on this topic, right? And to my surprise, one of the most seasoned professional event producers that I knew, who I had a good relationship with, put it really straight. They said, Yan, this isn't going to work. Nobody is looking for a magician to close off their conference. We're looking for experts, leaders from the industry that are recognizable. Okay, this is not entertainment. Like, we're going to have an after party. You can come then and just show your tricks. Now, of course, I disagreed. I outlined my perspective, why they're wrong. But the message that I kept hearing back is, Yan, magic and business strategy don't mix. It's just a non-starter for my clients. They felt like there's no way that they would even think about pitching this to their clients. I'll be honest with you. I spent a lot of time developing these ideas. I spent a lot of my energy on it. So when I was driving home, I actually felt pretty pissed off. I was angry. I was embarrassed even a little bit. To be honest, I was kind of heartbroken. But what I did is I didn't put their opinions aside. I waited until my feelings and my emotions subsided, and then I remembered that just because I'm right doesn't mean they're wrong. You see, if they think like this, probably other people perceive it like that as well. Should I not call myself a magician? It was a very counterintuitive thought at the time. Maybe I should frame it as a perception strategist. I did. Changed everything. You see, you don't have to put away people's ideas just because you disagree with them. There's actually a lot we can all learn from people, especially when we disagree with them, as long as you're willing to put the conscious effort and intent to shift perspectives. Let me tell you a little secret. Do you guys want to hear one little mind hack? Just one little mind hack. If you really want to persuade somebody, don't push your perspectives on them. There's no amounts of facts and figures that will change their mind. Take the time to understand their viewpoint, to understand where they're coming from, what biases are triggering these ideas, right? Then acknowledge and articulate it back to them using those exact same words and get them to tell you that, yes, you've understood what my point of view is. When a person feels heard, don't underestimate that power, because all of a sudden that person's mind becomes a lot more open and they're much more mentally available to consider your perspective. It works like magic. And let me tell you something. Every single time that I have allowed my ego and my perspective to distract me from other viewpoints, it's just resulted in missed opportunities, spoiled relationships. Really wasn't worth it when I look back at it. So before I disappear, no pun intended, I want to leave you with one little thought, okay? Can you imagine how many paradigm shifts in the world have taken much longer than they needed to, simply because people wouldn't let go of very, very rigid perspectives, right? Can you imagine how many people in the world are suffering inside their mind because of assumptions they've concluded about themselves? Even when their loved ones try to offer them another perspective, they don't see it. So I ask you to ask yourself, I want you to ask yourself, what rigid perspectives are holding you back from being the best version of yourself? I challenge you to get out of this room today and to practice the skill of shifting perspectives, the most undervalued skill in the world. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.